What's going on, guys? It's Karth, and welcome to my WoW Burning Crusade Warlock class guide. Today I'm going to be showing you how to play Warlock in Burning Crusade, and I will also be giving you guys some tips and tricks that I learned playing the entire way through Burning Crusade as a Warlock. Also want to apologize about the lack of videos recently. I've been kind of busy IRL, and so there's been a little bit of a gap between my videos, but this is going to start the first of a decently long series of I intend to do a class guide on every single class in BC. I will not be doing a spec guide for each one, but I will go through each specialization and talk about their strengths and weaknesses and the playstyle for each of them. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So, quick little overview. Warlock, obviously the class role is a DPS. All three specs you will play DPS. The specializations are Affliction, Demonology, and Destruction. And with those comes a kind of a difference in each of the roles, but I'll go over that as well. The strengths for Warlock is very, very high sustained damage. Warlock kind of lacks a little bit in burst, I won't lie. The burst that you have as a Warlock is your pot CD and your trinkets. Warlock does not have, and Blood Fury if you're playing Orc. Warlock does not have like a strong cooldown such as Death Wish, Rapid Fire, Bestial Wrath. Some of these other classes, you know, are fleshed out with cooldowns. Warlock unfortunately is not one of them, but it is really good sustained damage. Some decent utility with things such as curses, fears, AoE CC if you're the whole way down into Shadow Fury, Felguard Stun. There's some stuff in there. The Destruction build does not have too much utility, I'm not gonna lie, but Warlock also has the best AoE overall in the game. Mage does creep up probably past it in tier 5, but Mage obviously has a reliance on mana, whereas Warlock has a reliance on having your priests press renew on you. Some of the weaknesses, threat generation is probably the most notable one. It is a very, very threat intensive class. You know, you're gonna, especially if you crit some Shadow Bolts on the opener, you're gonna notice that you're gonna creep above your tanks. And you have to be very mindful of that, along with something else that I'm going to mention later on in the video. And then AoE is the same thing. AoE is arguably even more volatile for threat. So that's definitely like the big glaring weakness of Lock. Another one that I didn't that I forgot to add on here is mobility. Warlock definitely lacks in strong mobility. You can make up for that with certain professions, but just overall, like, built into the class, there's not a huge amount of mobility there. Shard management. This isn't too much of an issue, especially if you're good with planning ahead and you have a little bit of time outside of raid. I'll talk about one specific spot that I would always go to in this zone right here in the background. Before raid, top off on shards. It's not too big of a deal. And like I mentioned, this is primarily for single target. You have low burst. Lust and trinkets and pot CD will have you bursting pretty hard, but it won't be like a execute phase warrior with Death Wish and Wreck, or like a opener hunter with Rapid Fire, Bestial Wrath. It's not going to be that much of a burst, but it's still pretty decent, especially compared to some of the other classes. But like overall for the spec, it does have low burst. Stat priorities. Okay, so this one is a little bit of a feels craft from me, I'm not gonna lie. So the first and foremost, and this is not feels craft, this is a must-have, is spell hit to cap. So down below you can see the spell hit for Horde base is 202, and then with Totem of Wrath from an Ellie Shaman it is 164. Now, percentage-wise, this is 16%, or 13% with Totem of Wrath. For Alliance, you have the Draenei passive, I believe it's called Inspiring Presence. And the base with no Ellie Shaman is 189 spell hit rating, and with Totem of Wrath is 152. And then here, I value haste a lot on Warlock. It is the strongest stat in my opinion, besides hit, obviously. But on trash, it's actually stronger than hit because you don't need a hit cap on trash. But the reason I mention haste specifically is for trash. Haste benefits seed so much. It's ridiculous. Like, especially if you pop Skull Gul'dan in certain situations, you can get seed down to about a 1-second cast, and that is very strong. You will start blasting AoE. If you can throw in like trinket rotations with like Skull Gul'dan, and then Sextant of Unstable Currents is really good on trash if your Skull Gul'dan's on cooldown. And then something you can farm for actually in vanilla is Fetish. Fetish is like a huge initial threat drop, so you won't generate as much initial aggro, and you can kind of just go off of the rip. You don't have to hold for too long waiting for the prop pally and stuff because of that huge initial threat reduction. And after haste is spell power. Pretty clear cut, increases your damage. Shadow Bolt has a really nice scaling with spell power, especially with Shadow and Flame. And then crits last. I say crits last, but it's still really good, especially earlier, since haste is not available, and maintaining improved Shadow Bolt is harder depending on how many Warlocks you have. So if you have a relatively low amount of locks, then crit is actually a little bit more valuable to maintain the buff. But if you have 4 locks in your raid, IDS or ISB should never fall off of the main target. And then Spirit. Spirit scales with life tap, and it's better on AF because of a certain talent. Destruction benefits from crit more than others. That's not necessarily true, but the reason I stated that is because Shadow and Flame exists, and it allows you to... It's basically stronger scaling, right? But that is the stat priorities for Warlock. Alright, so rotation and spell prio. So I have these for all the different specs. Then I have some tips here at the end. So with AF, you're going to maintain your dots. You really only maintain corruption. And then you're going to be Curse of Elements if you're playing Affliction because of Malediction. And then Shadow Bolt filler. Demonology is the spec I've played the least. I haven't really touched it. I leveled with it a little bit, but other than that, I didn't really touch the spec. It's not great in rating. It's okay in PvP, but I'm pretty sure you play like a blend of Affliction and Demo with SLSL if you're playing lock PvP. I know there's a Felguard build and a Succubus build. Both are okay, but in rating specifically, you're not going to have you're not going to see the kind of damage you would as a Destro. And moving right into Destro, your main rotation is just press Shadow Bolt. And then life tap. For all these, you life tap when you need mana or when you're moving, but we'll see that a little bit later. Curse of Doom. If you're assigned to it, great. It's awesome. It's huge damage chunk. It'll definitely up your percentage. Probably give you a better shot at parsing. And then Immolate and Incinerate if you're playing the fire build. You more than likely won't play fire outside of phase 1. It's fun to play. It's very satisfying. But it's just kind of awkward to bounce between like sacking the Imp and sacking the Succubus for trash and single target. You're really not going to have too much time to do that especially if you're in a speedrun guild. You will not have time to do that. So you're probably just going to play the Shadow spec after tier 4. So here are some tips. Soul Shatter later on into the fight if possible. Now, obviously, if you are about to rip aggro off of like 3 crit Shadow Bolts in a row and you're like Feral Mangle got parried and you're about to rip, then press Soul Shatter. Which, quick note about that as well, all spells have the 1% resist in TBC, and Soul Shatter is included. So be aware that Soul Shatter can resist. And don't just like immediately assume that you're not going to have threat. Pay attention to your nameplates, your threat meter, stuff like that, to see if Soul Shatter does resist. Excuse me. ABC is kind of a popular acronym in the WoW community. It's always be casting. The main note with that is life tap while you have to move for certain mechanics and stuff like that. Obviously be mindful of your health. And then if you're playing Affliction, you can also Corruption on the move. You can refresh Corruption while moving because you have full 5 of 5 improved Corruption, so your Corruption is instant cast as AF. And then a threat safe opener you can do, I found myself doing this from time to time, is if for whatever reason you're feeling a little scared about this specific opener or something like that, you can immolate into a Corruption, and then you usually have a lot more like wiggle room with threat after that. And obviously the dots will still tick for full value on a boss mob. This is mainly on bosses. On trash, I would recommend throwing out either Curse of Elements, Curse of Recklessness, or Curse of Agony, depending on what you're signed or what your group kind of decides. But on AoE, you can throw out curses while your prop pally is gathering them, or if you're giving your prop pally a few globals before you start seeding, stuff like that. Curse of Doom. There's a couple fights in particular, Hydros is one of them, where Curse of Doom, if you're not mindful of it, you will rip aggro. Hydros in particular, 9 out of 10 times, the boss will threat drop like about a minute into the fight exactly. So if you apply Curse of Doom, and then a minute later it's going to tick over, like the actual damage is going to tick, and the boss is going to drop aggro, he will look at you and kill you. Curse of Doom, over the course of the expansion, can crit from 20k all the way up to like 28, 30k, depending on where you are in the expansion. That is a lot of threat. You don't have a lot of threat reduction as Destro especially. So just be mindful of Doom threat. Like just be aware of when it's gonna tick, and if you're like creeping up on the tanks already and Doom's like 5 seconds off of critting or off of ticking and you're already mid cast of a Shadow Bolt, maybe Soul Shatter like right after that global. Here's some professions you can go for. As a Warlock, you can go for probably the easiest one to kind of go for is Tailoring Engineering. For the Frozen Shadowweave set. It is really good early game, especially the boots in particular. The boots you can wear pretty much the whole way up through tier 5 and it's good. It's really awesome pair of boots. And you can wear Spellstrike pants specifically for pre-raid bis. I would not recommend wearing the Spellstrike hood. If you get really, really unlucky and you just can't find a metagem socket, then you can wear Spellstrike. But the metagem is like 3% crit, I believe, and that's just way stronger than you're gonna get from even the 2-piece of the Spellstrike. So, Spellstrike pants are very good though. NG, obviously grenades, good utility, target dummies, stuns, rocket boots, and then explosives, specifically sappers, are awesome. Enchanting, you can go for the, I believe it's 6 or 7 spell power on rings. It's a good, nice little bonus. Fun fact, you can actually enchant your rings and then drop the profession if you're really trying to min-max, or you're in like a, or if you just have an excessive amount of gold sitting around that you don't feel like hoarding or whatever. You can level enchanting the whole way up to where you can enchant your rings, drop the profession, and then level another one. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that unless you like have hundreds of thousands of gold lying around. And then jewel crafting. JC does have some specific gems that is associated with it. Enchanting does provide more spell power than JC does with their specific gems. But a note about jewel crafting, there's a specific item in Sunwell, which I believe is called the Pendant of Sunfire. It is haste, crit, spell power, and a socket. It is an awesome item. So, and if you opt to go for that, it's a very solid choice. Engineering is one of those ones that if you're not speedrunning, I wouldn't particularly consider NG super necessary. Sappers are obviously nice, but as a Warlock, if you're not speedrunning, Sappers are a melee range consumable, and if you're not, you know, going into melee, then there's really no big use for them. So something like tailoring enchanting or tailoring jewel crafting is a good combination. Or if you find yourself pugging often and you can't really rely on shamans for leatherworking, I didn't put it on here because if you're a Warlock using drums, it's kind of a feels bad moment. But if you know going into it that you're not going to be in a group with drums, and you want to pick up leatherworking on the Warlock, you can. It's just not great. So here's some consumables that you can go for on a lock. Flask of Pure Death, Brilliant Wizard Oil. A lot of these are pretty basic. It's nice in TBC compared to vanilla because the consumables have become a lot more condensed, and you don't have like a list of like 30 consumables that you're supposed to use if you're being optimal. Flask of Pure Death. You'll actually swap to the Arcane Fire one if you're the Firelock build, but I just went ahead and put... Oh wait, no, this one also gives fire. My bad, the Arcane is on a different one. That's what I was thinking of. Brilliant Wizard Oil. This is a consumable from Classic. The one that comes out in TBC is actually worse. Some people say it's actually better for AF to play the Superior Wizard Oil, which is like 6 more spell power and 14 less crit rating. Honestly, as AF, considering the fact that you still use Shadow Bolt a decent amount of time, I would probably still use Brilliant Wizard Oil even as Affliction. So that's just my personal take. Demonic runes or dark runes that are nice. It is filling the... It's basically a life tap without a GCD, which I know for some people is like kind of like a little min-maxy, but it's a cool little bonus if you want to go for them. Plus, farming demonic runes honestly is really easy in Burning Crusade. As a Warlock, I often found myself like, especially in later gear parts like tier 6 onwards, I could go over to Fellwood and just cast one Shadow Bolt and it would kill one of those satyrs. And if you spend like half an hour in Fellwood, you'll probably get like, you'll pick up like 2 or 3 of them, so it's not that bad. But bear in mind that demonic runes and dark runes share the cooldown of Hellstone, so if you're doing something like progression or something like that, then you will lose the Hellstone CD, so just be aware of that. Sappers, like I said, if you're NG. So I want to talk a little bit about destruction potions versus super mana potions, because I think people value super mana potions poorly, and I think it's a bad decision. So destruction potions on single target, by far strong, awesome. If you don't feel like spending the money for Destro pots, super mana potions are okay on single target. Destro potions are better, but if you feel like being a little conservative, then sure. I mean, mana pots are okay on single target, but on trash, super mana potions on trash are awesome. If you are about to run out of mana and you can save GCDs on life tap on trash specifically, man, super mana pots are amazing. Like, squeezing out 2 to 3 extra seeds without having to life tap in the middle there is just awesome, and it's gonna add a lot of damage. And then food buff, obviously you can use Blackened Basilisk, or you can use, I think it's Poached Bluefish. I always use the Blackened Basilisk because it was just more readily available on my server, but they both provide the exact same buff. Alright, moving into the specs, I'm gonna show you kind of the roles that each one provides, and then I'm also gonna show you an example talent build. So, Affliction is kind of the support role of Warlock. It is a niche spec. More often than not, you will run one. You will run it in kind of the whatever group. Most people call it like the survival hunter group of like just mishmash of players. It provides you with improved Curse of Elements, which is nice for your caster group. If you're playing like a very heavy caster comp, you will actually want to play an Afflock. But if you're playing a physical comp, I wouldn't recommend it. So Shadow's Embrace reduces the target's physical damage by 10%, which can be really nice for your tanks, and also on your healers, obviously. And then Malediction, which is quite low down in the Affliction tree. It will improve the effectiveness of your Cursive Elements. The playstyle is you maintain dots, which is primarily just Corruption and your Curse, and then Shadow Bolt. One quick note about Affliction, though. Seed is quite strong with Aff. Excuse me. Your Seed damage scale. Your Seed is an Affliction spell, right? And so it scales with certain Aff talents that are quite nice for it, actually. And it also has like an improved life tap talent, which helps with AoE as well. So on AoE, Afflock is just as comparable to Destro, but on single target is where it suffers. And then I put on here, it's also the PvP spec. It's a hybrid between Aff and Demos. I just categorized it as Affliction. You'll see it in like a Shadowplate comp in 2s and 3s, but I didn't really PvP too much on Warlock in TBC. There's probably another content creator that can give you more details on something like that. So this is an example talent build for Aff. You are picking up talents in the Affliction tree, such as Improved Corruption 5 of 5. You're getting Suppression, so it doesn't really help, if I'm being honest, because yes, it will give you a hit chance for your Affliction spells, but it doesn't actually, like, that doesn't apply to Shadow Bolt, right? So kind of whatever. Instead of Suppression, you can actually play Failed Concentration, and it's not bad, but in my opinion, you might as well pick up Suppression, because you're not gonna, like, just in case you kind of lose hit or something like that, or if you're down hit rating. But Failed Concentration, which is this talent right here, it only gives you like pushback avoidance on Drain Life, Drain Mana, Drain Soul, which I guess can be nice if you're like farming shards out in the open world, but even then it's very niche. Amplify Curse can be kind of nice, but it's also a little bit awkward because while playing Amplify Curse, you're not going to be the one applying Curse of Doom. So Grim Reach, 1 of 2. The range on the Aff spells, the only one that I really am concerned about is Seed. You can Seed from a little bit of a further distance. It might give you an advantage against some of the Destro locks, giving you a bit more range on it. Nightfall, it's kind of cool. It's an instant Shadow Bolt proc on your Corruption. Shadow's Embrace is this talent right here. It is, oh, it's 5% physical damage, it's not 10, my mistake. So basically your Corruption and your Seed as well, so Seed will spread this to trash, but your Corruption, Curse of Agony, Siphon Life, and Seed will cause your target to reduce, it will reduce your target's physical damage caused by 5%. You pick up Siphon Life. To my knowledge, you don't actually maintain Siphon Life. It could be nice in certain scenarios if you're like on something like Eridar Twins where everybody's just getting kind of wrecked. It can be nice to have this on yourself as a little backup, so you'd apply it and maintain it. Shadow Mastery, just increased shadow damage. Contagion. So Contagion is increased Agony, Seed of Corruption, or Curse of Agony, Corruption, Seed of Corruption damage by 5%. And then Malediction, which is the key talent right here, which is increase the damage bonus effect of your Curse of Elements by an additional 3%. 3%. So that's nice in caster comps. It can help on single target especially. It's definitely more useful in single target. And then on the Destro side, you pick up pretty basic talents: ISB, Bane, Devastation, Shadowburn, pushback reduction, increased range, and crit strike damage. Okay, so Demonology. So Demonology is in my opinion, kind of just the leveling spec. It doesn't really have a place in rating. You can play it, and it's not terrible, but in kind of the modern rating meta that we found ourselves in, people are a lot more meta heavy and meta focused. So if you roll up to a pug group and you're playing demo, people are probably going to look at you a little bit awkward. It also adds the element of pet management, which you really don't do as AF or Destro. As AF, you kind of just have your imp phase shift on trash, and then on bosses you can have him cast, but it's sitting right at range with you, so it's not that big of a deal. But on demo, you have to actually like kind of move your pet in and out of mechanics and stuff like that, and you have to maybe ask your healers to give it some health, and it's just kind of awkward to play in rating. But if you're solo leveling, go-to spec by far. Felguard is awesome for leveling. Example demo talent tree would be something like this. I'm not going to go too much into this. You basically roll down the demo tree, you pick up like Felguard, you pick up Soul Link, and then you grab like some Destro talents to make your Shadow Bolt better. You can throw 1 point in Improved Corruption here. It kind of just helps with haste essentially. I believe the GCD cap for this talent is like 2 out of 5, so with Improved Corruption, this is a side note, you kind of only want to play 1 of 5, 2 of 5, or 5 of 5. Playing 3 or 4 is actually kind of pointless, because reducing the cast time on Corruption to 0.8 seconds or 0.4 seconds doesn't really do much for you, because you're GCD locked anyways. Yeah, that's Demonology. And here is kind of the star of the show, Destro Lock. So this spec is one of the most consistent performers for all of Burning Crusade. From day 1 through the end of Sunwell, you can press Shadow Bolt and probably be first or second on the meters the whole way through the expansion. It's a great spec. Unfortunately, what it gives in damage, it kind of lacks in variance. If you don't like pressing one button, I would not recommend playing Warlock. You will definitely you will either fall in love with pressing Shadow Bolt or Seed of Corruption, or you're gonna hate it. So focus is obviously good damage. The core talents are like Demonic Sacrifice, Shadow and Flame, Ruin. The playstyle I put Nuke Caster, very high burst. This is mainly in relation to AoE. You know, like I said at the beginning, the burst is like kind of whatever in single target. It is the strongest burst of the 3 specs because of just how much damage your Shadow Bolt does compared to the other 2 specs. But it's not like, you know, like I said, it's not like full cooldown classes burst. And the pros, like I said, is great for raids throughout TBC. Some of the cons, which I guess I forgot to put on here, are mobility is bad. You rely on healers kind of helping you out through life tap a little bit, and threat. And this is kind of the cookie cutter Destro build. The Hellstone talent will actually be discussed throughout your raid, because you can actually hold 3 Hellstones at a time, but you can hold the different ranks of Hellstones. So as you drop Soul Wells, you will probably have already planned out in your raid like, hey, I'm going to be 1 out of 2 of this talent. And so people will grab a 1 out of 2 Hellstone, a 2 out of 2, and a 0 out of 2, just to make it easier before actually starting the raid and having to drop Soul Wells the midway through the actual, like, going through the raid. The notable talents in Demonology are kind of whatever. This one right here is Demonic Stamina, I believe the talent's called, or Demonic Embrace. So it's, you would grab 5 of 5 of this, and it's 15% stamina and 5% reduced spirit. some of these are also kind of whatever. I mean, this one will give you a little bit of health, this one will give you a little bit of mana. These two right here are kind of nice. This one is Feldom, which is an instant cast buff, which will reduce the summoning time of your demons by 5.5 seconds, and also reduce the mana cost by 50%. And then this one below it is a 40% or is a 4-second reduction to the cast and a 40% reduction to summoning your demons. So, oh, shit, my bad. So if you ever, die or whatever, and need to quickly rebuff, you can just throw on Fel Armor and then Feldom, Succubus, and quickly sack, and you'll be good to go after like refood buffing, basically. Demonic Aegis increases the effectiveness of Demon Armor and, more importantly, Fel Armor. And then throughout the Destro tree, if you're fire, you'll actually swap out Cataclysm for improved emo and Conflag. But through this, you can pick up Cataclysm, ISB, Bane, Devastation, Shadowburn, Pushback reduction, range, crit strike damage. Ember Storm. I have 5 out of 5 Ember Storm just because you can play into Immolate in certain scenarios, but if you don't want to play Ember Storm, you can actually play this talent right here, which is Nether Protection, which I would actually recommend on fights, especially in Sunwell. You find a lot of shadow and fire damage in Sunwell, so if you're 3 out of 3 in Nether Protection, you will have a, was it like a 10% chance to, or a 30% chance to be, after being hit by a shadow or fire spell, you become immune to them for 4 seconds. Especially on a fight like Brutalis or like Eridar Twins, this can be really, really useful. So on Sunwell, I'd actually recommend going with that. Backlash is kind of neat. It's a 3% crit, so it's kind of nice. But if you're hit by a physical attack, there's a relatively high chance that you can get a Backlash proc and your next Shadow Bolt will be instant cast. Obviously, you don't want to be getting hit, so you're not trying to proc this, but it's kind of a neat little like response. And then Shadow of Flame, or Shadow and Flame, increase your Shadow Bolt and Incinerate. Your Shadow Bolt and Incinerate spells gain an additional 20% of your bonus spell damage effects. This is a super hyper scaling talent. Very awesome. Kind of sucks that we can't pick up Shadow Fury, but you need that point to pick up DSAC, which is 15% damage, which you're just not going to pass up. So here's some tips and tricks for Warlock. Use Drain Soul to farm shards before raids. The lake where you go to raid SSC has these level 62 mobs that are still green to you, like 62 and 63. They're little frenzy mobs. They've got very little health, so like one Shadow Bolt and then you press Drain Soul as the Shadow Bolt's flying will usually net you a soul shard. So basically you just swim around the lake for a little bit. Doing that, you'll have full shards in like 5 minutes. It's really easy. Using focus macros for fear targets. If you find yourself fearing and CCing, then this can be helpful. Like mouse over to focus the target and stuff like that. Fear juggling with Curse of Recklessness. So if you apply Curse of Recklessness to the target and then fear it, the fear debuff will apply. And if you switch the curse to a different curse, the fear will actually activate. So what you can do is fear a target, apply Curse of Wreck, it'll start running to you, and then apply like Curse of Agony or Elements, and then the mob will actually start being feared, and then you can apply Curse of Wreck again, and it'll start like walking to you again, and you can kind of juggle mobs like that if you find yourself in that scenario. It's definitely more useful in like leveling or like, PvP with pets and stuff like that, but there's niche uses in raid if you're like super if you're super trying to recover a pull. Banish is probably going to be assigned as well for certain packs, especially like TK comes to mind when I think of like heavy banish pulls. Like I'd kind of mentioned, mana pots are awesome on trash. Know your threat, use Soul Shatter on cooldown. There's a saying that I like to go by that is cooldowns are best used on cooldown. Basically, if you have Soul Shatter sitting off CD, especially if you're moving from like one pack to another in like SSC, BT, and Hyjal, or SSC, BT, and like Sunwell, and it's just gonna sit there, and you're not gonna get a use of it out of a boss, then you can get a use out of it on trash, you know. And then I put a little joke here: become friends with your prop pally, but it's like a half joke. If you become the actual tip is become used to your prop pally's playstyle. If you know like your prop pally is like super into like threat management and trash like performance as a prop pally, and he's like Avenging Wrath on cooldown, Sapper on cooldown, stuff like that, then you can go a little bit crazy. But if you know that he's kind of like having an off night, or if he's like just kind of going through the motions a little bit, just give him a little bit more time. So here's some gear progression you're going to see throughout Burning Crusade. I'm not going to go through every single BIS list. If you guys want to actually see that, I'm not opposed to making those kind of videos. I just didn't want to put all that into this video because it's going to turn into an hour-long video. So just noted down some like notable upgrades throughout the phases. Pre-raid, the Shadow Weave set, Frozen Shadow Weave is really good. Spell Strike Pants, and then I also put on here the Oblivion set. You'll probably use this well into tier 5 and then possibly in tier 6 depending on like how geared you end up getting. The Oblivion set is the dungeon set for Warlocks, and the 4-piece is increased Seed of Corruption damage. It's really good, especially in tier 5. It's really good for trash damage, because Seed does not scale very well with spell power. Sort of like most AoE abilities in Classic, their spell power coefficient is really bad, and Seed and the Oblivion set gives you base damage on Seed, so it's definitely stronger than like trying to scale with it. Tier 4, you're gonna pick up the tier 4 2-piece. Warlocks are prioed that, if I remember correctly, because the hunters just don't need it and the mages don't either, as far as I'm aware. The mages might, but the hunters I know don't use tier 4. So the Void Heart 2-piece, I believe the BIS setup is shoulders and gloves, if I remember correctly. You're gonna wear this into tier 6. It's a nice spell power proc, and it's good. Frozen Shadow Weave still from the pre-raid setup, still good. Like I said, the boots especially are really good. Moving into tier 5, you're gonna maintain that 2-piece tier 4. Some notable pieces that you're gonna get are Vestments of the Sea Witch and Belt of Blasting, both solid upgrades. Wand of the Forgotten Star is also really good off of Solarian. But tier 5 doesn't really give you like that big power boost that you're gonna get over here in tier 6. So in tier 6 you actually wear full 4-piece Malefic. So you're gonna wear 4-piece tier 6. It is heavy prio to Warlocks, and it switches where the only set that won't be prioed to locks is the first one, because it'll be prioed to pallies, or your prop pally in particular, because the prop pally bonus is increased consecration damage, and that just helps everybody in the whole raid. Like, giving them the first 4-piece is just strong for everybody. But after that, Warlocks are prioed. It's awesome. It's like 10% increased Shadow Ball damage or something like that. It's just like the only button that you do damage with on single target is just getting stronger. So, and then Zardoom is notable. Skull Gul'dan, obviously. Roak, or Ring of Ancient Knowledge. So Roak is actually a trash farm, so you can farm for it. It's just kind of annoying to do. Zardoom and Skull Gul'dan, how that'll probably work is, you know, your one Warlock's gonna get Skull, the other one's gonna get Zardoom, is more than likely how that's gonna work out amongst the locks specifically. And then Sunwell, you see just haste pouring everywhere. Sunwell, you replace about every single piece of gear, whereas throughout this, throughout these tiers, you replace most pieces moving into the next one, especially tier 5 to tier 6, but Sunwell, you take everything and you putting on something new. There's like Sunfire Robe, the new tier 6 pieces, the boots, belt, and bracers are all BIS. They all have hit, haste, crit, and spell power on them, which is just ridiculous. So you're gonna wear all 3 of those pieces, and then the shoulders, I believe, are BIS. So you keep the shoulders. Shifting Naru Sliver, Sunflare, the weapon, Amethyst the Convoker is a nice off piece. If you like, you can wear shoulders of the BT tier, or you can wear pants as well. Not a bad option. So you can kind of finagle like loot lists if you're doing loot lists or soft reses. You can kind of finagle it to see like what other people are doing and tweak your setup a little bit. Amulet of Unfettered Magics is BIS if you are not playing Jewel Crafting. If you're playing Jewel Crafting, it is not BIS. Jewel Crafting has a really awesome neck that you can craft that is just really good. But if not, you can play Amulet of Unfettered Magics. I wanted to take a little bit of time to mention some of the resources and some add-ons that you can go ahead and use. Obviously the Classic Warlock Discord is an awesome place where you can find people theory crafting, people a lot smarter than me, people that spend a lot more time looking into setups and sims and stuff like that more than me. WoWTBC.gg is a great resource. I personally like it. It's kind of streamlined, kind of modernized. 70 upgrades is where you can plan some gear sets. Weak Auras, Dew Timer, Classic Spell Activator, and then Warcraft Logs, obviously. Alright guys, thanks again for watching the Warlock TBC guide. Consider subscribing to my channel for more content coming soon, and go ahead and smash that shadow bolt key and the like button. Alright, thanks guys. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.